Hi, today I'll be coding something else for this week's CodePen challenge, and it's going to have the same starting point as the previous demo, but we're going to be coding everything from scratch, and it is going to be more complex this time. We're going to have some cards with background images with some text, and there are going to be some visual effects, blending, filtering, stuff like that. And hopefully it's not going to take me all day, because this sort of stuff is a lot more complicated than the geometric stuff where you just put in a formula and then everything poof happens from there. Now in this case we'll be starting the same way as we did for the previous demo. We are going to get an array of entries out of this object where we have the text and the image link. So we are going to have an array of entries, object entries, so something like this. And if you need a reference for this function, it's going to be linked in the description, both for the video and for the CodePen demo. Next step, it's going to be get the length of this array. Okay, then we're going to put everything within a section wrapper, and if I could type, that would be great. And here in a style attribute, we are going to pass the total number of cards, which is going to be n, the length of our array. And then we're going to have a loop, so for let I going from 0 all the way up to n, increment this I and create a figure. So every card is going to be a figure, right? And here, just like for the section, we are going to have in a style attribute, right, the index, which is going to be set to the loop index. So we pass to the CSS this custom property index, which gets set here as the loop index. And within this figure, we're going to have an image and a fig caption. Now the image source, we are going to get it from here. So here for the entries, the key is going to have index 0 and the value is going to have index 1. So index 1, and here we're going to need to interpolate. So it's going to look like this, and you can now see. Now for the previous one we also had a heading, so let's say we're going to have something like that. Okay, and now we're going to move on to the CSS and prettify this stuff because it looks really ugly at this point. We're going to start with something like a basic reset, so we're going to have margin 0, padding 0 for absolutely everything, and then on the body we are going to set a figure width. So we are going to set this as a clamp value, and let's say that the minimum is going to be something like 10 ems, and something like this. We're going to max out the width, right? Now we are going to have a grid display for everything, so body, section, and figure, they're all going to have display grid, right? So here for the section we are going to have grid autoflow column, right? And for the figure elements, right, we are going to set their width to that custom property, like that. And you can see how now we have the figures sized to basically a fifth of the viewport, but the images overflow the figures. So this width is going to be 100%, right? And we are going to set a fixed aspect ratio. So Yeah, we don't even have autocomplete for this one. I actually wrote an article about aspect ratio, and it's going to be linked in the description, and it's a relatively new feature, relatively well supported, but yeah, we don't yet have autocomplete for it. So let's say that aspect ratio is going to be something like this. Okay, and we'll also we don't want the image to get stretched, so we're going to also set object fit cover, something like that. Actually, I'm just going to make a bit more sense like this. Okay, so you can see how now the images are not stretched anymore, and we are going to want to do something about the layout also for the body, because it kind of looks weird how everything is just up there. So let's say that not there, I can't use a keyboard. Grid template rows, max content for the heading, and the remaining time, the remaining space, and then we are going to want to have a min height, which is the viewport height at the very least. So yeah, this looks kind of weird, because now what we have the space for the figure grid, it's split evenly between the image and the fig caption, and we don't really want that. So we're going to want to have, here we're going to have two pseudos, so before and after, and also image and fig caption, and we're going to have grid area, first row, first column, so we want them all to just overlap, right? And we can just collapse that now. And also for the fig caption, we are going to want to position it at the bottom, so that's going to be the vertical alignment, so that's align self end, right? Okay, now it's there, it's down. So we're going to want to do something a bit different for the figure as well. So we can place content center like this. Okay, much better. So now you can see how the text is on top of the image, and the figure is just limited to the maximum, the biggest of its children, which is the image. Okay, so having done this, let's also change the background, change the text color, because we want it on dark, so background not quite black but still pretty dark. And now we are going to use it for the fig caption. Actually, let's just put it for the section, I think, the color, and it's going to be a lot easier. So just make it white there. Okay, now of course it's going to depend on the background, but we're going to fix that. And for the heading, we are going to want a text shadow, and we are going to want to actually generate this with a mixin. So we're going to need to, I keep seeing that, but that's from the HTML, and I don't know, I keep getting the impression that there's something and I need to scroll so I don't see it. So I don't know, if I do it like this, then I'm not going to see. For some reason, with the latest CodePen redesign, you can kind of see through like a tiny little bit of the HTML panel, and I don't know, it gives me the impression that there's some CSS there when I have the CSS panel maximized. Totally weird. I don't know, it's like an optical illusion or something. So we are going to use this module so we can have trigonometric functions. So here we are going to want to split this for 45 degrees, which is basically 1/8 of 360 degrees. So should I call it, let's call it function outline or something like this. I'm not even sure what I should call it. It's really hard to decide what to name things. So I said that we are going to split the circle into 8 pieces, and we are going to have a color that is going to be by default black for the shadow, right? So now we are going to have a base angle here, and this one is going to be okay, so we have the color, and also we are going to want to have something like a radius, right? 2 pixels. A spread radius for the outline. I don't know what thickness, outline thickness, line thickness. I don't know what to call stuff. 360 degrees over. Okay, so that's going to be the base angle, and the shadow list is going to be initially empty. So then we're going to have for I from 0 to n, right? We are going to have the current angle is I times the base angle, right? And we are going to add to the shadow, right? We are going to add that R value times cosine. Okay, I need to bring this up, right? Not the whole thing, right? For the Y, it's going to be sine, right? So those are going to be, and then we're going to use the color, right? And then we are going to return that shadow list. So here we are going to have text, isn't it like text shadow? Yeah. Why didn't I see it in the drop down? I have no idea. So we're going to have outline. Okay, you can kind of see it. Let's actually make sure that its color is the background color. Actually, let's just right, and use it here, and also use it here like this, and you can kind of see it, but it's going to be a lot more obvious if we bump up the font and we make it a bit more interesting. So font, I don't even know. And I am pretty sure, let's go back here. I am pretty sure that I had a pretty font put here, but I obviously can't remember what the hell it's called. So yeah, that's another thing that I find really complicated. The fonts thing, because yeah, who's going to remember what font to use and what not? Fallbacks. Yeah, Okay, and here we are also going to set a font size, and let's say it's going to be 3ms. So it's going to look something like that. Okay. For some reason that didn't quite give. Oh, I wasn't adding, I was just replacing it. That was so silly. Now we have the outline properly. Yeah, the more code you have to write, the more chances you'll make a mistake. And that's why I don't like doing this sort of non-geometric demos, because there's just so much there. So, I'm not even sure. Should I use... Let's say we're going to have text align center for everything. And let's say we're also going to have a bigger line height here. So, something like that, I suppose. And let's say I want a bit more space in between stuff, in between the letters there, so it's going to look nicer. And I think I'm just going to leave it here because I keep tweaking this thing, and yeah, I'm never going to finish if I keep tweaking it. Okay, now the next step is going to be prettifying this stuff a little bit. Let's say that we're going to decide for a selection radius or something like that for the spotlight, and let's say that this is going to be a pretty big fraction of this figure width. So let's say that the diameter is going to be 3/4, so it's going to be a half of 3/4. So selection radius is going to be calc, so 0.5 times 0.75 times the figure width. But I guess I can just write this, because this is half of 0.75, right? Okay, so having this, we can move on here, and we're just going to collapse that, and we're going to have the before and after. Before and after, right? They're not going to show up unless we set a content, and we're just going to set it to nothing because we don't really want to have a text in there, and we are going to place them on top of everything. So we're going to have index 2, right? And then we are also going to set a background, and this is how we get our spotlight. So basically we're going to have a radial gradient, circle. We are going to take care of the positioning, but for now we're going to have, I accidentally hit, okay, transparent, and then we are going to go to RGBA. Let's use that background, right? And let's say 0.5 for now, something like that. And we are going to want to have basically a sharp stop in there. So that's going to be the selection radius. And of course, there are all these sorts of decisions. Should I have selection radius plus 1 pixel here, or selection radius minus 1 pixel here? So well, I guess we're going to go with this one, so you can kind of see it right now. And of course, we're going to want to have a position, right? So this is going to be circle at, let's say that it's going to default to 0, Let's see it now. Okay, it's going to look something like that. Again, this one is going to default to 0, right? That's not where we want it positioned. We want to have just a single position, so it's going to be inside for 1, at most 2, and then outside for the rest, right? So we are going to do that from the JS, just like for the previous demo. So we are going to start in a pretty similar manner. So first up, constant section. So this is going to be the section. So we're going to get it document query selector, right? So that gives us that, and then we're going to have the figures, and we can get section query selector all, and this gives us a node list, and we want to turn it into an array. And by the way, I am going to link to the documentation for the spread as well, so you can check that one out as well. Okay, and we are going to want to map this to, actually let's make it on the next row, right? So and of course we want to map it to an object, so we need to put this within parentheses, because otherwise it's going to think it's the function, right? So this is going to error if I don't have those round parentheses outside of everything, so like that. And I'm also going to want to have an index, and I'm going to get that from this custom property I that's set right here. So I'm going to get it from there. So the index, actually I can just get it like this, right? Much better, and I don't need to read the style. I think that works better. Okay, so having done this, we are also going to set like a position, and this is going to be the current position, right? And this is going to change as we move the mouse. Then we are going to have function SetBox, and we are going to call this initially, right, SetBox at the very beginning, and then we're also going to call it on resize. So add event listener, okay. So doing this means we are going to go through all the figures, so, and we're going to have 4 each, right? And the current one is going, okay, the box, right, is going to be get bounding client rectangle. Okay, by the way, there is going to be a link to the documentation for this function as well, and for other stuff. Just so you know, it's going to be linked in the description, both for the video and for the demo. And then we are going to compute a middle. So this is going to have an X component and a Y component, right? So it's basically going to be an object with an X component, which is going to be half. So basically the average between the left and the right. So these are the coordinates of the midpoint, and right, then similarly we are going to have for the Y coordinate top and then bottom, right? Okay, so this is done, and then we can move to the interesting part, which is another event listener for MouseMove. And this is going to set the coordinates, the x and y coordinates, for the point in the middle of the spotlight, which is going to be just one spotlight for everything, but it's going to, yeah, we're going to use the backgrounds for each, and the spotlight is going to fall outside the boundaries of the element otherwise. So if the mouse is not in there. So what happens here? First up, we are going to set the position. So for that, let's also create here an object of directions. So we're going to have, for the x direction, we are going to have so those are the sizes along those two directions. So actually that's not an array, it's an object, right? For let axis in directions, I don't know what else to call that thing, right? We are going to get the position, right? It's going to be sorry, it needs to be quoted, right? And here we're going to interpolate so something like that, because it's client X with capital X and client Y, right? And then we are going to set that position, the X and the Y, we are going to set them on the body. So document body, because we're going to want to have the spotlight outside of and we're going to use pseudos on the body to set those, right? But here we're going to want to set the X and Y, so basically the current direction we interpolate. So this is either X or Y, but we don't want to write it twice. And then again, it's going to be something in pixels, right? So basically we are going to want to trim decimals in case we have them, right? I'm not sure if we're getting decimals, but just in case. It's just one of those sort of things. Okay, and then we're going to go through all the figures. So for each, and so we have the current one, and let's also put the index in there, right? Are we really going to need the index? I'm not sure. Let's see if we need it, because I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do here. So we are going to have this loop once more, right? For each direction, right? We are going to have on the element, we are going to set. So we're going to need to set the relative one, right? The relative X. Because for the background position, for the center, for the position of the center of the circle, we are going to need a relative position relative to the element. But what we have here is the absolute coordinate, when the mouse moves across the viewport, right? So here, so set property, okay, and then again, yeah, we need to interpolate that, because otherwise it's just going to take it literally. And we are going to set, and this is going to be a value in percentages, because as I said, it's going to be relative. So what we interpolate in here is going to be the difference between the absolute position and the start edge, which is going to be the left edge, or X horizontally, and the top edge, or Y vertically. So this is going to be like this, and we're going to divide by the dimension along the by the size along the A axis. I don't even know what to call these things. So here, like this, okay, and we're going to have to multiply everything with 100 because we want percentages, right, and not something decimal. What's the problem? Oh, set property, right. Style is not a function. What are you doing? Why am I stuck with the... Oh, come on. Why am I stuck with the cursor from there? Please tell me you didn't freeze. Please tell me you did not freeze. Oh, come on. Cancel. No. What is happening here? Okay, so I'm missing a set property there, right? Okay, we have fixed that part, and I lost what I wrote there. But anyway, as I said, it's going to be percentages, and we're going to have to interpolate this computation. So basically we have the ratio. So here we have the difference between the absolute value minus the start edge, which is going to be this one, and then we're going to divide that difference between the parentheses, we're going to divide it by the size along the current dimension A, the current axis, or whatever you want to call it, okay, box, and we're going to have directions of A, right, and everything multiplied with 100 because we don't want a number between 0 and 1, we want a percentage between 0 and 100, which is the same thing, but yeah, it's just a different format. And we are going to want to take care of, oh no, between parentheses, that's what I wanted, so we don't have a ton of decimals there. So something like that. Now, having done this, right, okay, you can now see how it's starting to look more like a proper kind of spotlight, right? So we're not going to do anything more in there. We can actually, I want to be able to collapse that as well, and okay, so we're not going to be doing anything else in there, nothing else in there either, right? So we can collapse that too, and we can go back to the CSS now, right? And let's go back to the CSS, and let's save this, right? And let's refresh, because I want to show you something. You can see how they all have those in the corner, and now when I'm with the mouse over here, it just disappears. So we want to avoid that, and we are going to set this to a value outside the viewport, well outside the viewport. make it viewport height for the Y. So something like that. And now they don't just disappear when I move the cursor over the viewport. And something else which is more like of a prettifying thing. So I'm going to want to have something slightly different between the two pseudo elements. So I'm going to want to have one blend mode for the before and one for the after, so we get different effects. So first up, we're going to want a mixed blend mode saturation, so that we grayscale everything outside. You can see how outside it's grayscaled, but that's not that big of a contrast. So we are also going to have a different blend mode on the after, so we increase the contrast. So mixed blend mode multiply, and now you can see how you can tell we have a spotlight. It's more obvious because if I comment this out, you can see how again you can tell there's a difference, but it's not that obvious, whereas adding this thing right here, it's a lot more obvious, right? And of course we are going to want to do something a bit more interesting with that alpha there, but for now let's just leave it at that. Maybe, I don't know, it kind of bugs me. This could be a bit darker, something like that. Okay, so something like that. Okay, let's make things a bit more interesting. So let's say that I'm not even sure. Actually, I think I'm going to use clip path, so overflow and border radius is going to be a bit let's go back to the JS a bit, and we are going to set a value k that is going to depend on which, on which we hover over, which of the figures we hover over, and where exactly in the figure we are. So basically it's going to be like a progress, like a difference, index difference, I don't even know what else to call it. So okay, and let's call it an index difference, so di, right? And so this is going to be the current absolute position minus the mid position of the card, so of the current card that we have in the loop right here. So that's going to be mid, so something like that. And we are going to take this and divide it by the card width, right? So this is going to be this relative index difference, whatever. And then I don't think we're going to need to do anything else in the JS. I think we can just write. We're going to go back to the CSS. It's so weird when, the styles just disappear when I just go from one panel to the other. And, a bit of scrolling fixes it, but it's still weird and confusing. So, let's go back for the figure, right? So we have that index difference, and we're going to get the sign of it. So basically get whether we're on the right or the left side of the spotlight. So this card is on it's kind of difficult. The cat, okay, the cat is on the left of the spotlight when the spotlight is in the middle, okay, and the cards afterwards are on the right, right? So that's what we want to get a sign. We're going to want to get that sign, clamp, and we're going to have -1, and that difference, and let's say that we're going to divide by something like that, and 1, right? So this is going to give us the sign, and then we are going to compute the bit value from this sign, and this is going to give us either 0 or 1. So it's going to give us 0 for before, and it's going to give us 1 for after. So we are going to have calc 0.5 times the sign plus 1. So if the sign is -1, this gives us 0, and if the sign is 1, this gives us 1, because it's 1 plus 1, and then that's 2, and multiplied with 0.5 gives us 1. And then we can also get the absolute value, which is going to be the maximum between di and the inverse and the additive inverse. Okay, and something else we're going to want to compute here is this difference, which is going to be n minus the absolute value and everything divided by n. So basically the difference, the distance from the spotlighted one, from the card that has the spotlight over. This is going to be like a relative distance. Okay, and we are going to want to have this sort of, because linear functions aren't going to do it, and we don't already have power in CSS, unfortunately. Well, let's just see it this way. I think we could have just done it the other way, but oh well. So now we are going to want to have here clip path. I don't know, let's say that we are going to go for a base percentage value. So something like 13%, something like that, okay? So here we are going to have inset, and here we're going to have calc, that k value, right? And we are going to multiply this with that percentage. And of course, that's going to mess up other things in there. So let's say this k defaults to 1, right? And you can kind of see how it appears that they scale and stuff like that, but they really don't. It's just the inset function, right? And we're going to have a sort of transform, let's say perspective 25 ems, and then we're going to have a rotate y, right, and then we're going to have a calc that depends on this di. So times, I don't even know, a small angle. So it's going to look, you can kind of see, right? It's starting to get interesting. Also, let's have some rounding here, round, something like that, right? And now that we've done this, we can also make this alpha a bit more interesting. So let's say that we're going to have that alpha there, and it's going to be a calc, right? I don't know, let's say that we're going to have a base factor, so or something like that, 0.5, or I'm not even sure, so something like that, perhaps smaller than 0.5, which is why I used 0.39, which is slightly smaller than 0.4, smaller than 0.5. Okay, so we're going to have that factor right there, and we're going to multiply it with k, and again we're going to have a default there so we don't mess up our gradient. 1 minus that factor, and we need to interpolate that f value because this is going to be a custom property, right? So I think this should do it. So let's say that we have that alpha there. Yes, you can kind of see, much nicer. Now I wonder if I made this even smaller, it's like even bigger contrast, right? Let's bring it back to that. Okay, so we're done with that part, right, for the figure, and I think, yeah, I don't think we're going to do anything else. You can just collapse the whole figure, and then we're going to play a little bit with the image. So let's say that we're going to add a transform, and then also for the fig caption we can add some things. I'm not even sure, should we add some sort of transform for the fig caption? Let's see. So and of course this one is going to depend on whether it's the one that's with the spotlight on top or not. So let's say that here we're going to have something like a scale, right? And I'm not even sure if I should have So let's get this. This is going to be p over 200%. So basically half, but expressed as a decimal value, not as a percentage, right? So here we're going to have scale, calc, right? That multiplier, let's see it. So you can kind of see how the image scales a little bit. And let's say we're also going to have a translation, translate y, and again we're going to use half of that percentage, so calc right, .5 times the percentage. So you can see how it gets interesting. Now here we are going to use a margin that again depends on that percentage. Not there. Still had the cursor. So margin 0 and that percentage for the laterals and for the bottom for our fig caption. Where is it? Where are you, fig caption? Okay. When all else fails. Okay, it showed up on top of the image now. Okay, that's good. Let's say we are going to have a semi-transparent background for it, because I'm not quite seeing a contrast, much of a contrast. So let's say that it's going to be RGBA, and I don't even know, 0.35, so about a third of a way should do it. And let's also bump up the line height. And let's also have text shadow. Something like that. Okay, looks much better. And let's say that we are going to have a line thickness, right? So we're going to have a linear gradient, and that's going to be current color, that line, and transparent. Let's see it. And of course sharp transition there. Right, and we are going to have a background position and a background size and only a repeat Y. So for the background position, let's just leave it at 0 for now, and the background size is going to be, first up, K times 100%, and then vertically it's going to be 100% minus that line thickness L, right? And we're going to have only a repeat Y, right? And we're going to have something a bit different for background position. So for background position, we are going to want to have it positioned at the top, obviously, but horizontally we are going to use that bit volume, and of course that's inside the var function, right? So we're going to have this times actually let's just subtract the sign and we put everything between parentheses so we don't have to multiply twice, right? Because otherwise we just multiply each of them with 100%, so that would be a bit of a waste. Okay, so something's clearly not quite as intended. So I thought, oh, right, that's something's still not right. Oh, it's plus the sign. Right, it's plus the sign. Told you it doesn't really work with mental computations. Like I should have just you know, written the computations in a comment and just deleted it. Okay, but it does work now, which is good. Let's also make the opacity depend on some stuff, so because why not? So opacity, actually, I'm kind of sick and tired of just setting a fallback everywhere. So let's go back here. Let's go back here. And going back here gives me an idea. What if we make this even more pronounced? So for example, something like this. Okay, what's wrong? Okay, so opacity, yeah, I was messing things up there, but what if it's more pronounced like this? I think I like it more like this, if it's some more, and one thing that really annoys me here, overflow X hidden, like this. Okay, much better, much nicer. So I finally fixed that part, and yeah, I was saying, so basically, let's just make that 0 so we don't have to, that basically is going to make the difference. No, because we wanted the difference to be 0, right? So we want k to be 1 by default. Make this n by default. And then we can just get rid of all those, right? With just k. And bingo. Okay, so let's do something about the opacity right there. But yeah, I had this idea. Not k. So actually we can just do this part. Not k, and like that, right? So we get that right there, and then we can just use not k here. I don't know why I didn't do that sooner. And again here we're going to use not K, and let's say that, yeah, just leave it at not K. That should pretty much do it. You can see how it fades for those that are further away. That looks nice, I think. So we are kind of done with the cards, but I also want the spotlight outside of them. So for that, we are going to use pseudo elements on the body, so you have the spotlight outside as well. Let's collapse everything else, collapse the image, and just leave stuff for the body. So here we're going to have before and after, right? Position fixed, right? Top 0, left 0. We are going to give them a padding that's set to that selection radius. Border radius 50%, and then we are going to set a transform, right? That's going to be translate, and we have along 2 directions. First up, we are going to have X, right, minus 50%, and then we're going to have something very similar for Y, right, except it's going to be Y right there. And let's say that we are going to have mixed blend mode overlay, and nothing's going to show up unless we set content, obviously. Let's say we're going to have a box shadow. Something that glows. So so you can kind of see it. Okay, and we're going to want to have something light. So let's say that we are going to have a switch, and I will be linking to an article where I explain this switch concept. So the links are going to be in the description, both for the video and for the demo on CodePen. And here we switch that I from 0 to 1, right? So we can say that this right here is going to depend on the switch. So basically it's going to be calc I, so something like that. So just one is going to have that glow, and then for the background we are going to go the other way around. So for the bottom one we are going to have a background. So RGBA basically 1 minus. Is there a point in computing a not I? I'm not even sure. So let's say it's going to be this difference times 0.5. Let's see it. Okay, so you can see now how you have that sort of spotlight, right? Effect over more stuff. So that looks pretty good actually. Let's refresh a bit. So you can see how you get that sort of that looks pretty nice, I will say. Okay, I'm not going to play with it. I'm going to leave it at this. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you like the work that I'm putting out since early 2012 and you want me to be able to do more in the future, please consider supporting it. You can do so by being a cool cat and becoming a patron on Patreon, or if monthly support is not your style, there's the option of one-time donation, or you can make me happy with a gift off my wish list, or you could please share this to show the world what can be done with CSS these days, because honestly I think it's pretty damn cool. In any event, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye!